Cool. So we are, man, about to jump into an amazing conversation. I'm really excited. Super, proud of, this individual that we're talking to. Super, dope classmate of mine. From Michigan State University. We entered into that place same time. Many moons ago, but went on to become this amazing Emmy Award winning journalist. Most people know her from her, sports journalism side. Co-hosting SportsCenter amongst many other amazing things that she did at the network. 2018 NABJ Journalist of the Year, contributing writer over at the Atlantic. Um, super dope podcast host that Jemele Hill is unbothered. One of my favorite podcasts. I remember those early days when they would y'all would do the breaks on the podcast and there would be no ads yet and it'll go right back into the music. But now we got the ads in line. You're killing now. Season 4. Co-founder of Lodge Freeway Media with our homegirl, Kelly Carter, the newly engaged Kelly Carter. But Jemele Hill, what's
Hey, what's going
happening?
on? Nothing. That was quite the introduction. But yeah, we've known each other now for, oof, geez, it's been since the 90s.
Ain't that crazy?
It is crazy, yeah.
So what a lot of people don't know. So I mean, it's like a lot. We got a short amount of time. Especially for the amount of stuff that I want to go ahead and get into. But the cool thing is, when I first start hearing or start seeing this byline, Jemele Hill, it was in our student newspaper, the State News, and it was just like, man, who is this, opinionated person with all of these, great thoughts that are just all these amazing things, and what a lot of people, now who see you on this side, they don't really understand. Like it wasn't about sports. It didn't start off being like you were this real whole person, with this perspective on many different things. Like talk about those earlier days. Just really cutting your teeth in journalism. Just from a collegiate standpoint. Before you start to see a real big trajectory. But what was your mindset at that time?
Well, at that time, I was just trying to make it, and so the state news was an entry point for my career for sure. But I have been, since the 10th grade, I pretty much knew I wanted to be a journalist. So I was, very fortunate in that regard because sometimes it just takes people a little longer or they try other careers before they finally find the one that they want to do. And I knew in high school, so I started working for my high school newspaper. I started working for the Detroit Free Press when I was in high school. And so by the time I got to the state news, I already had professional clips. And once I was there at the state news, of course, you do a bunch of different things. I was a sports reporter at the state news for a semester. I also did news. I was a campus editor. I was a managing editor. So I was able to do kind of like all these things. And so because of the internships that I had throughout the summer, that allowed me to get a pretty head start by the time I actually graduated from college. So it was really a good foundational element. So what you're talking about is when the first time I tried my hand at column writing was at the state news. And I have told people this. I was like, I've been considered polarizing since I started writing,
Right,
you
right.
know, which is kind of wild because I didn't even think I was saying anything that was really controversial. And for some reason, I was able to stoke some dislike from every camp: the white people, the black people, the fraternities and the sororities. Like everybody really had some opinions about me. So, I've been receiving hate, since I was in college. But those early days were very foundational for me because it taught me the impact of writing.
Yeah, I was so fascinated, just being on campus, and that was just my first glimpse of that type of journalism by a peer, and I was very fortunate too at that time, during college to waste no time and get right into my career as well, so it
Oh
was it
yeah,
was it was it was, it was
it
just
was
it
a
was
time.
just. Now go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, you. I mean, people. I don't know how many people who may be watching this or listening know this, but like, you was kind of the man on campus for for a little bit, because you had the entertainment, like bringing, people to campus on live. Like you was just, you really were doing your thing. So, it was great to see like how you cut your teeth. I can say I saw it. I saw the grind, I saw the
Right.
hustle that you had.
Nah, so, and it is just I appreciate that, and it was just great to like I said, for you, it was one of those game recognized game things. Just as we just continue to grow and build throughout our careers, and you mentioned just starting writing as a student in Detroit, Detroit public schools, you know, man. Yo, you went to one of the you went to Mumford, right? So it's like our first connection for me, being from Flint, my first connection to Mumford, was Beverly Hills Cop, Axel Foley. It was like, is this even a real high school in Detroit? To later find out that you actually went to that school. I'm pretty sure at that time, though, when you saw Beverly Hills Cop and this guy, this mythical character, iconic character, from your high school, that you eventually went to. I mean, that had to have been like a crazy sense of pride for the city of Detroit.
What people may not know is that the creator of the Beverly Hills Cop series, and he went on to be a billion-dollar producer and director, Jerry Bruckheimer, went to Mumford. That's why Mumford was in the movie, and that's also why Axel Foley wore a Detroit Lions jacket, right? And so, Mumford, we have a proud history. Practically every Winans went there. The Clark sisters went there.
There you go.
like,
Speak on it.
yeah, we were definitely a gospel hotbed for sure. But Mumford and public education in Detroit was very important because I'm amazed that, especially as I talk to people and other Black people who are from other places, um, a lot of people, a lot of Black folks did not grow up going to schools that had predominantly Black teachers, and
Right.
so yeah, I mean, I had Black teachers my entire life, and this idea of like not teaching Black history was like non-existent because most of especially all the Black history teachers I had. I mean, I took classes at Mumford that were centered on African American history in general. Like it was just a regular part of the curriculum and coursework. And so one of the things I'm grateful about being from Detroit is that I got a strong sense of my identity. I had a strong sense of that before I ever got to Michigan State and ever, was entering a world where you're in predominantly white spaces because Detroit is 85, 90% Black. I went to mostly Black schools my entire, life growing up. And so I think it was really important because it kept me rooted. I was proud of who I was, proud to be from Detroit, and of course, proud to be a Black woman, Black girl slash Black woman.
And you know what? I'm glad that you said that because even with hearing you talk extensively about that, with the new book Uphill, your memoir that everybody should go ahead and grab. It will be a New York Times bestseller. I've been loving to see the just the press run and all of the great things that's being said. But you speaking on coming from Detroit, being very comfortable with your identity and your blackness is like I felt the same way. Coming up in Flint public schools, I had a Black principal, I had Black teachers. Since elementary school all the way to to high school. But I will say I was very ignorant when it came to the thought of going to an HBCU. I was fascinated by school days, fascinated by a different world, but in my mind, I dealt with so much blackness coming from Flint. I wasn't mad at the idea of going to a predominantly white institution, Michigan State, because I felt like that could help bring me some sort of balance. Because I'm like, man, what my trajectory, career wise, I felt like, man, I'm going to be dealing with a lot of white people. So I was like, man, this institution could really help me. I didn't realize I'll deal with so much culture shock, as you did too, right? Like talk about that element, just like that culture shock, that I
Yeah,
know you
well,
experienced the same way I did.
the thing is, I think I don't know if it's regional to some degree. I think it is like when you're not from a city or a state that has any HBCUs, and it's just not a regular part of the lexicon. The same
Right.
way, like just like you, I watched A Different World and Cosby Show, and saw School Days, and I was like, man, that looks really incredible. And I applied to FAMU, and I wanted to go to FAMU, but my mother thought it was too far. And
Mm.
it's kind of crazy because I got an academic scholarship that that would have paid for my way to go to FAMU, and so I was like, in hindsight, I actually didn't have to listen to my mama because she didn't really pay up for school. I could have just went, but nevertheless, Michigan State, because of the strong journalism program, is why I went there. And I'm kind of glad you said that about how there was a certain thinking about HBCUs, because I used to hear it all the time about HBCUs don't represent the real world, and you should go to a PWI because that's mostly what you're likely to deal with. And what people miss is that if going to a HBCU, just like growing up in Detroit, just like growing up in Flint, is that when you're surrounded by people that look like you, again, it teaches you to be firmly rooted in your identity. So it very much prepares you for the real world because you're going to need that. Need to have a sense of who you are before you step in any door. But yeah, going to state, like I knew Michigan State was white. I just didn't know it was that white. Because,
Right, right,
it's 40,000 students, like 90% of them are white. And
right.
it was the first time I lived in close proximity of white people, lived, and had to regularly kind of socialize, go to class with that many white people. So it was definitely a lot, different. And I was one of the people when I went to state, like I just did a random roommate selection. I didn't pick my roommate.
Right.
So yeah, my first roommates were white, my suite mates were white, and so I think it was an education on both sides because we used to have some really fascinating racial conversations for sure. And you know, I'm grateful to have had that experience because I love Michigan State. And the thing about I think the black people who went there is that there was a real connectivity because it was CMB, we all we got.
Right.
Right? So we
Very
we
much
kind
so.
of had yeah we kind of had to stay connected and rooted, but it also I was also able to see kind of up close about race and racism and just how that plays into everyday life. I mean, the first time I got called a nigger was at Michigan State. It wasn't,
Wow.
you know, and so facing sometimes some of the racial backlash, it was really eye opening.
Yeah, that place, Michigan State. I mean, to your point, I mean, I had an amazing time, amazing experience. It was very, interesting. Just the adversity that you dealt with, dealing with race. I remember my very first semester. My first semester there, I was running track, and I remember walking home from track practice, and with my headphones on, and not really paying attention, and I look up, and I'm surrounded by police. Because I fit the description of some black guy that just committed a crime, and they're like, oh yeah, that's give me your ID and all this stuff, and oh okay, that's not him, and they just left, right? And the weird thing, I just walked to my dorm, and I didn't make a big deal out of it because we just come from environments to where that's kind of normal, but it's just whack at the same time. But going back to the whole idea of us experiencing this predominantly white university and really leaning into an opportunity to learn more about the world and all of these different types of races and cultures that we weren't exposed to necessarily growing up. It just made us so much richer as individuals. But it sucks in hindsight to think, especially being that we dealing with so many different racial things that are just out in the open right now. I doubt it very seriously if white people in particular think like, what, I've grown up around white people my whole life. I really think I should have attended HBCU so I could become more cultured, or right.
Well, here's what I became very aware of at Michigan State is that, generally speaking, and I know this is going to sound like a pretty blanket generalization, but I found it to be true, and I found it to be true since, is that there's a great many people, I should say, who are not curious about us. And the thing about Black people is that we have to know how white people function,
Right.
how they live, what it's like, because we're always in their spaces, and we're more often than not, we're in the minority. So we learn and know much more about them than they do about us. Because I remember being stunned, my suite mates, when I got to Michigan State my freshman year, they had never heard of Malcolm X, never heard of him. And,
Right.
and then, on the other end of that, I could tell them about Roman emperors and certainly about, all the presidents, and like all would be considered, I guess, white centered history. I mean, it was just obviously taught as American history, but they didn't know anything about Black people other than from a pop culture standpoint. Like they knew who Snoop was, but in terms of our history, they didn't know anything. And what happens is that so many white people don't grow up, or even as adults, even bother to learn. And because they can function in the world and never know a thing about us, we can't do that. We have to know about them. And so I think that's part of the reason why we do have a lot of racial conflict, because the level of ignorance, whether unintentional or intentional, is very high.
Very much so. And that's something that, I mean, we're talking about getting the real solutions. That's a part of it. People having a sense and feel and understanding that, man, to your point, we have to learn how to move and navigate, in your world. But, oftentimes you don't even think about having to do the same for us, which is where we have such a disconnect. You were saying something, recently, when you appeared on, Angela Rye is Unbothered. You were a guest on the podcast. Angela Rye is Unbothered. When y'all reverse roles. That was pretty dope. But I mean, you mentioned how for us, a lot of the different conflicts, that people get really up in a uproar about when it comes to Black Lives Matter, or different things that are constantly on the ballot, or that we're often concerned about and we're fighting for Black people. I mean, for us, it's not a political thing. It's not just politics for us. It's like, yo, like, please don't kill us. Like that's, at the bare minimum, that's what we're asking for. We're not even going, equal pay. I mean, there's a lot of other things, abortion, but at the bare minimum, we're just saying like, hey, can you just leave us alone? Can we just move the same way y'all move?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the history of kind of uh, movements in this country, they really boil down to a very simple concept: is that all we've ever asked for is dignity. It's really it. I mean,
Right.
and it's something that this country has never willingly given us. We've had to fight for it. We've had to march for it. We've had to die for it. And so that's why I hate when people speak about racism and institutional racism and oppression and want to put it in a bag of politics, because that's not politics. Politics is about, legislation and pros and cons. It's like they're usually like a for and an against. There's none of that in racism. Like there's no opposing side. Okay, you're either committed to not being racist, or being firmly anti-racist, or you're on the wrong side, and that's it.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, a lot of our experiences get minimized, and it just boils down to simple humanity. And it's like Black people just want dignity, they want equality, and the fact that we're still fighting for a lot of the things our ancestors and um, had fought for is, in a way, um, kind of sad. It's kind of depressing. It's like, wow, we're still talking about fortifying voting rights. That's the same thing Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about. The same thing he was marching for. And when we think about it, it really things that people think are so long ago aren't. I mean, Black people have been enslaved more than they've been free.
Right.
It's just like in the history of this country, yeah, enslaved. We still have not been free longer than enslavement lasted, and longer than Jim Crow. Still haven't. So, with that being the case, I think that's why when I see how people react so um, negatively to Black Lives Matter as a movement, and to a simple demand for respect and to not be killed, not executed in the street. And, it's very bothersome that people can't really understand something that seems on the face of it so basic.
Exactly. Well, I'm telling you. So we're here. You have the memoir, of course, Uphill. That you wrote, and I'm glad that you wrote it, and hopefully people will pick it up to even just get a sense and feel, to get more perspective, get context, get more of your why, in terms of just like how you are, why you roll the way you roll, why your thought process is the way it is. You got like super vulnerable in there, a lot of conversation about your mom, and this book in the process help you even ask some questions I'm sure that you probably were wondering, but the book sort of forced your hand to like go even deeper into layers, with conversations, finding out about the family, finding out about like, your mom's why, which affected you in so many ways. And in your mind, you probably was, thinking negatively of how, some of the things that your mama, some of the things, the challenges that your mom had, you probably were thinking negatively about them in real time. But, the process of writing this book, it just seemed to help give you a lot more grace and, for her and all of the different things that challenges she had to overcome, which led to her, addiction. And, it's just
Yeah,
cool to, to see you be able to, just strip down and just share a lot of vulnerable stories.
I think with this book and opening up, people are getting a different version of me that they hadn't been able to get before. And so, um, and also for me, I think it's important for me to show people who come from similar backgrounds or who have family members who have struggled with these same issues that I discuss it within the book to know that there's no shame there.
You brought up a lot of amazing things that has me thinking a lot. With the me having an 11-year-old daughter, right? Based on your perception of how your life was, giving some insight of your mom's perception, what she dealt with her mom. I just know I have to be that much more attentive as a parent and a lot more careful and conscious. Especially with the little girl. So I mean, these all of these stories help, help tremendously. So, I definitely want to be, super, respectful of the time. I got like a million things, but um, one thing that I want to close with, is how much of a loyal friend you are. Because we have a mutual friend, Kelly Carter, and I give her a hard time about this all the time. I remember, I don't even know if I'm going with this. How you gave her a cup of courage on this one, night in particular, on her 21st birthday. You know where I'm about to go with this. You know what I'm saying?
I can't believe you about
Y'all
to tell
set
this
me
story.
up. Come on, y'all, Jamel, y'all set me up. Like I remember being in my apartment, people, minding my business. You know what I'm saying? I'm in college. Actually, my girlfriend was in my bedroom. She was, halfway asleep, but not really.
Oh,
And
okay.
I hear a knock at the door. It's late. And it's I'm like, man, this is Jamel and Kelly at my door, and I'm like, hey, what's going on, girls? It's kind of late, but I'm just like, hey, what's up? I'll come in to tell y'all been hanging out. Kelly was a little saucy,
She
21st
was
birthday,
21st
and
birthday.
this girl just started to tell me about, like, man, it's just something I have a confession, and I've been liking you, and that girl that you're dating, she's not good for you. I don't even like her. She's not a nice person, not knowing she was in the next room. And I'm just
Oh
here, I'm
God.
listening, and I'm like, what the hell did I just walk my what did y'all do? Like what did I'm like I've heard Kelly's perspective. Like, you had to amp her up.
Oh, I totally did.
You probably amp did you amp her up to do that?
I absolutely amped her up to do that. I put the battery in her battery pack because my thing is that rather than sit around and be tormented by it and just have something on your chest, I'm like, just say it. What's the worst that could happen? Well, clearly there was a worst that could happen.
Yo,
So yeah, what? See, you brought that up, but now she probably has probably gonna be like, I still owe you one for that.
yo, I'm just saying, but the fact that y'all are still super good today, like I said, we laugh about it all the time. And
Yeah,
Kelly's excuse is, hey, well, you ain't stay with her anyway, so it don't even matter. I did you a favor. But freaking hilarious, hilarious,
I
hilarious.
mean, it's kind of a fact. She did. Yes. Well, luckily, that story didn't make the book.
Damn. Second book. Yo,
Second, yeah. We'll
Uphill.
wait for the next memoir. Put and throw that in there.
The next memoir, Uphill, is the name of the book. Available everywhere. And to your point, if there's a black bookstore that you can purchase this book from, go ahead and make that, support them. But no, it's dope. So we had to represent. We had to have this conversation. because we're here at Real Times Media. We got a whole bunch of amazing Black publications under the umbrella, but Michigan Chronicle in particular. There's no way we could let you come out with this book and not have this conversation. Encourage our people, to support you on this next journey. As an author, published author.
Well, I really appreciate the time as well, and it's important work you're doing because I think the Black press is still crucial to us as a functioning democracy.
Absolutely. So look out. Make sure you get the book. Listen to the podcast. Jemele Hill is Unbothered on Spotify. Got the new documentary that's going to be coming out on Colin Kaepernick, ESPN, a part of the 30 for 30 films. Just space and atmosphere. Yes, you still get ESPN checks. Appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your tour. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to see you when you come down to the A when the tour gets down here. And, travel safely, Jemele. Appreciate you for making the time.
All right. Will do. Take care.